How do you help your buyers break through the noise and feel confident to purchase from you? We're going to talk about buyer enablement today on Closing Time. Hey everyone, this is Chip House. I'm CMO of Insightly, and today on Closing Time, I'm joined by Luigi Prestinenzi. He's a sales coach, a trainer, and host of the Scalable Growth Podcast. Welcome, Luigi.
Thanks for having me, Chip.
You bet. Super great to have you. So today we're talking about buyer enablement. So what's your intro pitch to help the guests out there understand what this topic's all about?
I know it's an interesting term, right? And look, we've heard all different types of enablement sort of topics over the last few years. But the reason why I've absolutely fallen in love with buyer enablement is because if we actually truly think about it, our role as a sales professional, as a company that's trying to get somebody else to buy our product, is essentially to educate them, is to enable them, is to give them the confidence that the decision they're about to make is the right decision for them. And so for me, the buyer enablement piece is all about not just enabling the one buyer, but especially selling in B2B, enterprise. There's more than one person now involved in the decision-making process. And buyer enablement is making sure that we're aligning all people in that committee, getting consensus, educating, and ensuring every person in that committee can see the benefit and the value to them so that they can confidently arrive at a point of decision.
So, there's a ton to unpack there. So the first thing is just using the language buyer enablement, which I think is very kind of friendly to the people you're trying to sell to, which is, and it puts the salesperson or the marketer, immediately in the shoes of who they're trying to impact, right? So just the name in and of itself is sort of new and refreshing from, the way to look at sales and marketing and go to market in general. So the second thing you kind of unpacked there a little bit, Luigi, was you're selling to an org, right?
Yeah.
So in today's B2B environment, it's not just one person you're trying to influence. There's multiple people inside of a decision-making process over a journey, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I love the way that you frame that up, right? Because if we think about sales enablement or marketing enablement from your perspective, it's about, how do we enable your own team to achieve success? That's essentially what buyer enablement it is, right? How do we achieve our customers to achieve success? And we need to start changing the way we think about this because it's not about us, it's about them. And you're absolutely right. More people are getting involved in that buying committee. I was on a call with a client last night from Israel, and they said that they're at the last. They had sent the quote already. They were waiting for it to be digitally signed. But then the head of growth came back and said, hey, our CFO wants to have a talk to you, right? And he said he's now starting to see a pattern of this happening more and more. So I think that's another opportunity for both marketing teams and sales teams is to start to understand that in an economic environment that might be getting a bit tougher, the CFO and other people are going to get involved in these decision-making decisions, right? And if you're not preparing for it, if you're not thinking about the additional personas that might be getting involved in the conversation, then you're not truly able to enable them as a committee to get consensus and arrive at that appointed decision.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So if you are a salesperson and you're used to kind of doing an org level sale, right, where you're interacting maybe with a CFO, marketing person, a salesperson, an ops person, somebody on the CS side, you've already kind of built that muscle tissue.
Yeah.
And so now it doesn't freak you out when somebody says, hey, I need to bring in my CFO.
You should be prepared for it, right? And then in some cases, we should be preparing our buyer anyway to present to the CFO because they're going to have to go get that budgetary approval. And again, one of my other clients, I love this concept of what they implemented during one of our coaching sessions was they actually took the time and they role played with their champion on presenting the business case to their executive team. And they discussed with them what would be some of the objections that might come up. And then they worked on those objections. They worked on the responses. They worked on how would you then respond to it? How would you then get them, you know, get that consensus? And I love that, because that for me is true buyer enablement. Because if we have a champion, if we have built a relationship with somebody, and the benefit to them is quite significant, and the business case for them is something that's going to enable them to achieve their objectives, then it's our job to help them facilitate those internal conversations in the event that we can't get access to those people in the committee.
When you have a committee, right? I mean, if you think about a general buyer's journey, and you're trying to make an impact such that a prospect knows you, likes you, trusts you, right? And so you're trying to multiply that times two, three, four times, right?
Yeah.
And so talk to me about truly doing an org level engagement where you're successfully enabling the buyer, and truly multiple buyers.
Mm.
Somebody truly within that group might be the actual economic buyer, and others are influencers. But tell me, kind of take us through the steps, Luigi, for how a salesperson can best approach that.
Well, I think the first thing is, in any pursuit, right? And in your pursuit plan, and this is where I think sometimes sellers are quick to react, they're quick to go to market, chase down prospects, they build their list. I mean, we live in such a luxurious world, Chip. I know back in, I'm not that old, right? I've hit 40, but I've been selling my entire life. We didn't have access when I first started selling to tools like LinkedIn or data enrichment tools that you could literally build. Like in Sales Navigator, you can org map. You can literally sit there, and in 5 minutes, you've got the entire org map, and then you've got all the contact details, and then you can actually do a quick search and find out all this information about the org map, right? It used to take us, literally hours upon hours to do that research back in the day. And I think we don't actually utilize those tools to our advantage before we start to reach out. And for me, again, if I'm reaching out to an opportunity, I want to kind of think about, okay, what does the structure look like? Where is the problem that I know that I can have an impact? Where's the secondary point? So, because I want to make sure I'm multi-threading. And then what is my pursuit plan around this opportunity? And what does my point of view need to look like? And also think step 2 or 3, when I do get that meeting, say with this person that could possibly be my champion, what's going to be my strategy to then leverage the next person to come into that to that conversation? And these are the things that we should be thinking about when we're pursuing opportunities, right? Because if we're not in our pre-call planner, if we're not preparing for that, then we're not actually building our action plan with our prospect about getting the other stakeholders involved in the conversation. Like, we should be thinking about that earlier in the piece and not being reactive in the sales process, because as a sales professional, we solve these problems every single day. We're working with organizations around a certain problem and helping organizations achieve a certain outcome. Just like with Insightly, right? You're helping customers um, shorten the sales cycle, increase win rates, right? That's what you're helping them with every single day, and drop the cost per acquisition. And you're seeing patterns when engaging with buyers. You know certain things, and you also know how sort of a deal needs to be constructed in order to get to an outcome. So therefore, the seller should be then guiding the buyer through this process as well, because you're doing this all the time. The buyer's not necessarily buying what you sell all the time, right? So they might not have the level of education on what needs to happen to get this deal done. And this is where we need to be preparing that at the very first moment in our pre-call planner. Give consideration to what might that path look like, and then validate that with our champion once they've decided that, yes, this is something we want to investigate further. So I know that's a long answer, Chip, and I've gone around a few different spots, but it's not just an easy response as saying, hey, do this to get this.
And you dug into a couple of things there that I really liked, and one is sort of that informed process where you're sort of building confidence with the buyer.
Yeah.
We had Doug Landis on, Luigi. I think you're familiar with Doug, and he goes as far as saying is, "Hey, the discovery call is dead," and because you and I have all been on the calls where you have a salesperson and they just ask you endless questions. You're wondering, where is this going, right? And you've added maybe zero value at that point as a salesperson if you're just asking questions, right? versus showing up with a hypothesis about their business, a point of view. Hey, I've seen customers like you in your industry with a similar situation. They've solved the problem in this way. And you're actually truly adding value to the buyer right then in the process, and you're building confidence and you're validating your solution by doing so. And so, what tools, what other tips do you have to help a salesperson develop a strong hypothesis that's truly buyer helpful?
I'm a big fan of the point of view, because again, if I'm going to speak to a buyer, if we think about it, the very first thing that we're getting time from a buyer, and time is valuable. Like, if you think about a C-level executive, if you do the calculation on what does it cost us, what does it cost a C-level executive to give an hour, half an hour of their time to a salesperson, it's actually, it's a couple $100 potentially. If we're going to be asking ourselves, what are we giving them for that $100, $200 of their time? And if we're just turning up and, you're right, doing a discovery and, trying to find the pain so that we can then present a solution, that's not really creating any value, right? So that point of view for me is fundamental, because the point of view allows us to have a conversation. It allows us to then conduct a discovery, because the point of view will open the conversation to how is that impacting, or is this happening for you in your organization? Now, the best way to come up with that point of view, as a seller, if I'm speaking to 50 CMOs, I'm going to start to see some trends. I'm going to start to see some opportunities, right? Plus my own research. This is why doing research on your ideal customer profile, but going deeper into the industry, looking at association publications, right? The more, and this is why I often say research as a sales professional is your superpower, because your ability to research and learn about that sector allows you to come up with that point of view, right? And, often I know early in my career that when I started selling to one industry, look, one type of company, I would find momentum in that sector, and I would land 2, 3, 4, 5 similar companies in the same sector. Why? Because I started talking their language. I started learning about their sector. And then I'm able to share that insight with other people like them, because the thing is, our buyers don't have all the answers, right? And there was a study done by VanillaSoft, which was pretty cool, which they surveyed, I think it was about 5,000 senior decision makers. I've got to confirm how many people it was, and they actually said, if you're a salesperson getting time on my calendar, 88% of the respondents said, our minimum expectation of you is know my industry, know my challenges, and know my problems, right? And have some sort of insight to share. That's the minimum expectations that buyers have today. Because otherwise, why should I give up my time to you as a seller if you're not going to help educate me or share any insight with me? Doesn't make sense.
And as a buyer, I obviously buy software. You can feel it. It's palpably different when the salesperson understands your business and what you might be struggling with. It truly is an entirely different situation. Well, you started to drill into it a little bit there, Luigi, and as we're coming to the end. So talk to me about outcomes. What specific outcomes do you see as a salesperson, whether, deal velocity or maybe deal size, that you're truly able to predict or do a better job at as a salesperson when you crush the buyer enablement piece?
The opportunity for sellers, when they're able to come up with that point of view, you're going to build, or in most cases, the rapport that you build with your prospects, you increase that rapport, because they see you as a professional. And I think this is really important, right? They see that you've got capability. So the level of trust is higher. Their willingness to open up is there. And you're able to get to a point of conversation about a particular topic sooner. And therefore, if you can do that quicker, you can then get access to that buying committee in a shorter time frame. So what will happen is, you're right, that velocity, that time to sale will shorten, or that time to know will shorten. And I think this is really important, right? We often see, when I do like a pipeline audit, I find that there's some opportunities there that are just stuck and they've been in there for 100, 150 days. And you're like, why are they still there? Because sellers kind of hold on to them. That's the worst outcome for sellers, to just hold on to opportunities that are never going to close, right? Because they're using hope as a strategy. So when you truly think about buyer enablement, you're able to get to an outcome sooner, a yes or a no, right? And a no is not necessarily a bad thing, because a no could be, okay, now we know exactly the current state of play and what we need to do differently to maybe progress that opportunity, right? So that's the key thing with buyer enablement. It allows us to move to that point of decision quicker by having a very clear process on what are the steps that we need to facilitate in order to get that buying committee to a point of decision.
That's amazing, Luigi. So BANT is dead. The discovery call is dead. Buyer enablement is fully wired and in, but it's just crazy how this space has changed, right? So any final thoughts?
No, look, if you want to enable your buying journey, I guess you've got to sign up to Insightly, because that'll help you shorten the sales cycle and increase your win rates.
You bet. Well played. Well, hey, so thanks so much for showing up on this episode of Closing Time, Luigi. It was really amazing. And thanks to all of you for joining us on this episode. We'll see you next time.